Hi, it's Graham Crouch, Functional Consultant on the CAPS project. In this video, we'll be talking about our major project requests and our major capital plan submission. So that includes creating a project request, completing the preliminary budget, allocating that cash flow, and completing the project request fact sheet.
Then I'll also be discussing how to add those project requests to our major capital plans and subsequently submitting those major capital plans to the capital management branch for further analysis. So if I want to create a project request from my default dashboard, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my left-hand navigation menu under capital planning where I see project requests. That will then take me to my chosen view, so in this case all minor, but I want to create a major here. And again, if you click the new button in the command bar, it will create a project request, not just a minor or major. It will start you from the default project request creation area. So I'm going to click new. And again, it opens up this form where I'm asked to submit, to populate submission category. So in this case, I want a major project. So I'm just going to click the look down here and I'm just going to select addition. Now keep in mind, whenever you create a project request, excluding AFGs, which have a slightly different process, you are going to find yourself on this page asking you to select the submission category. So regardless if I'm creating a minor project like PEP or SEP, or a major project like addition or new school, I will start from this project request page where it's asking me to populate submission category. So again, I populated submission category, which is a required field. I'm going to click save in my bottom right here.
So once you save, the main project request form shows here. And there's a few things that I just want to make note on this form. So again, this first tab, no matter what project request type you're creating, whether that's major, minor, AFG, a new school, addition, a CNCP project, it doesn't matter. This first tab here will be that sort of submission category specific data. So again, in this case, this is all of that sort of core addition information that you need to fill in, in order for this addition project request to be, considered as a part of the major capital plan. So you can see that for addition, there's a number of other tabs, and so you can see the tabs up here at the top, and we're going to talk about each one of these here in terms of preliminary budget, the cash flow allocation, and the project request fact sheet. So we will discuss that. But as you can see here, so I have some required fields that I need to fill in before formally saving this project request. So the first one is facility. So I'm just going to pick a facility here. Blundell Elementary, and you can see what appears here is then a quick view. So again, sort of a window into data that is about Blundell Elementary. You can sort of visualize that. These are all read-only fields. They're just literally to give me some information about Blundell Elementary. And of course, if I make a mistake here and I need to change that, that quick view will disappear and reappear with that accurate information. The next field that I see here is project type. Now in this case, because addition, project request of submission category addition only has one project type, but it's just to make note that for most of our our submission categories, there are more than one project type. So we're aware, like if you're making a bus project, there's going to be a new or replacement project. So just to sort of key you into expecting to have to select something here for project type, but in the case of addition, it's already pre-populated because there's only one type. So then we go down and we see there's a site requirement. So obviously a unique field there for the addition. Anticipated project start year. So that's just asking me, when do I think that this project needs to be approved for? When when will that sort of the core work around construction and design development and funding really take place? So that's that anticipated project start year. And then, a slightly different year here is when will this, this project be complete and occupancy be returned to the building, in this case, in an addition. So I would say, it's going to take a couple of years here. Then I'm asked some other information, so about the current facility index and what will this addition project do to that, facility condition index. So I'm able to put that in here. I then see some recommended fields here. So future lowest grade and future highest grade. I can see here right now it's Blundell Elementary is a 1 to 9. 9. So maybe with this addition, it's going to change it to K to 9. So I can just indicate that there. And then another unique field for some of our projects is number of portables eliminated. So, maybe with this addition, we're eliminating a couple portables. Then I have this section called SD project ID. So that's a place for me to put in my my local numbering system. So, maybe this project request comes from a system that your school district uses to track, project requests. So I can then just put in that number here, and that just allows me to, more easily sort of compare my system to the MyCAPS system. And then finally, a project description. And so this is just an area for us to describe the project request in as little or as much detailed as we want. This information is then shown to a colleague that might be accessing this project request, or indeed your planning officers once they are able to see this project request. So I'm just going to put in something here. And then I'm going to proceed down here. So one of the things that you're going to see throughout the system is this notion of 3 different capacity numbers. And so in the context of an addition, an addition is sort of an expansion program project. So, that is going to affect the capacity numbers for, in this case, Blundell Elementary. So I just want to use this juncture to sort of explain what those capacity numbers are. So you have design capacity. So design capacity is what we used to refer to as nominal capacity throughout the system on the facility records, on the project records, and here on the project request records. You may see references to change in design capacity. You'll see that on the PRFS, etc. So for this addition, again, I'm saying that it's going to increase the design capacity. So I'm just going to put in an increase here of 100. I can then see I have a bunch of fields here that are locked, and that's because they're calculated. The system, when I save here, you see is going to make these calculations for me. So you can see that the total increase now with all of my numbers is a total of 100 to my design capacity of Blundell Elementary. Then I have what's called change in calculated operating capacity. So operating capacity in a calculated operating capacity is based upon calculations and factors that CMB applies to the MyCAPS system. So these are numbers that are calculated based on CMB's understanding of operating capacity. So again, they're all locked, so you need not worry, and they're also calculated by the system. But we're also understanding that each school district may have its own way of calculating operating capacity. So we want to obviously have an area for you to put that information in. So you can see here in the context of an addition, I'm also asked to indicate that change in district operating capacity. So again, I'm just going to say that with my calculation in my school district, it's going to be a change in kindergarten of 90, for instance. I'm then going to save here. And once I save here, the project request is formally created. It has a good set of data. I've entered in the recommended, the required, the optional fields even, and I'm ready to sort of proceed in the next step of this project request. So once I've filled in the sort of core information related to my major project request here, I'm now sort of at the stage where I want to proceed, with the next steps in this project request life cycle. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go to my preliminary budget and calculate some understanding of what this project request would actually cost, the amount of funding that I'm actually requesting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go up to my preliminary budget tab, and I'm going to click here. And this now asks me for another, sort of set of data points here. And, based on, my inputs on this screen, the system will be able to calculate, an initial preliminary budget amount for this project request. So the first couple of fields here are required here. I need to indicate what type of facility that this project is going against. Now, again, this project is an addition to Blundell Elementary. So the system already knows that, this addition is obviously against an elementary. So that's the sort of base budget rates and things that it's going to use. Then I'm asked to input a community location. So for most of the school districts, this will be sort of a very easy task of just inputting the community that you're a part of, and indicating that is sort of the location factors where that need to be calculated in the preliminary budget. Then I have the supplemental or other items section. So this is a place for us to indicate those costs that sort of go above and beyond your normal preliminary budget calculation. So again, is there a demolition that might, cost this project some money? Is there some abnormal topography or municipal fees or some temporary accommodation requirements that would, sort of go above and beyond the normal project the sort of normal project completion cost. So this is the area I'm going to capture that. So for instance, if there was an abnormal topography, that may affect, this project request, I'm just going to select this toggle and I'm going to change it to yes. And then you'll see here that a new field is now showing this abnormal topography cost, and it's required for me to fill that in. So I've indicated that it includes abnormal topography. So, the system wants to know, well, okay, well, how much extra is that going to cost? So I'm just going to enter in an amount here. And so that same sort of information, will there be a neighborhood learning center also as part of this new this project? Is that going to be a component that's a part of it? Is there municipal fees here? Is there a temporary accommodation? I can indicate all of those amounts here in the supplemental section, and that will carry over to that preliminary budget calculation. Which brings me to this unique section here, which is other costs. So other costs is an area of the project request and of the preliminary budget tab where we can enter in those costs that don't fit, not only in the sort of general preliminary budget calculation, but also within the supplemental section. So it's costs that you may have some questions about. It's a bit of a unique situation, but you want to let CMB know that we're going to need some extra money for that. And this might be something that you populate before you calculate it, but as well, like if you calculate this preliminary budget and it comes out to an amount where you just think it's not going to meet what you've calculated on your side, then you can also add that cost here, and it will then reflect on your second calculation. But so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to demonstrate that. So I'm now ready. Right now this is the information that I have about this this project request and the information that I want to use to calculate this preliminary budget. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to my command bar here, and you can see there's quite a few things on this command bar. One of the main things being then calculate budget. So I'm just going to click that, and the system is then going to work behind the scenes to calculate my preliminary budget. It then lets me know that it's been successful. And I'm going to see here at the bottom of the screen here an initial preliminary budget total here and an initial total space allocation. So if for any reason I feel like one of these numbers is, it's not quite capturing everything that, is needed for this project request, I can go up to adjust this preliminary budget total. I can allocate some other costs here. So say I think it's going to be, $160,000 more for something unique. I'm just going to put in 160,000 here. Then what you'll see is the system then makes this other cost description mandatory. So if I put in an amount here, I do need to indicate, well, what is that other cost for? Okay. And then say also, I think, really it's more like going to be about a 600-foot addition. What I can then do is I can go up to my additional space allocation field here, and I can enter in, that additional space that I think this project is going to take up. So I'm going to say it's another 50 square meters. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and rerun my budget, because again, anytime I enter in additional information or I change information here, I'm going to need to run and calculate the preliminary budget once again for it to have the most up-to-date picture here. So I'm just going to calculate budget. It's then going to do that calculation behind the scenes once again, and you can see here that my preliminary budget total has now been adjusted to reflect that change of cost here and that additional space. You can also see the space allocation is now it's also integrated in that additional 50 square meters. Now, if I want to understand what sort of figures, what factors and costs went into this this preliminary budget. So to answer this sort of question, well, how did the system get this 5 million and change amount for my preliminary budget total? What I can do is I can run the preliminary budget report. So the way that I do that is I just simply go up to my command bar and I select Run Report. Then what I can do is I can simply access the preliminary budget report here. When I click that, then the report will generate in a separate tab. And as you can see here, what it does is it breaks down that preliminary budget total into sort of categories, if you will. So the allocation to total owner costs, so owner cost line items, to construction items, to the unit rates and the factors used to calculate the various points of this preliminary budget. All of those supplemental information that we talked about, so the abnormal topography and that other issue as well, right? And then it also includes the risk reserve and the preliminary budget total here at the bottom. Now, if you want to understand specifically, like for instance, what went into the calculation of this liability insurance, what you can do is you can go to the report command bar here and simply select next page, which will bring you then to this preliminary budget explanation. And so this actually contains every single line item that would be produced on any version of the preliminary budget. Obviously the preliminary budget looks a little bit different for additions than it does for, say, seismic. So every single one of the line items are explained here. So I wanted liability insurance, and you can see here that calculation is explained in further detail. And so that this explanation section will generate on every single time that you generate the preliminary budget. So that can be helpful. But on the other hand, if you want to print this or you want to save this, make note that again on the command bar you can see the save ability here to many different formats, and then the print button. Just make sure that you print that first page to exclude the instructions. So after the preliminary budget has been generated, I can see a new warning has appeared at the top of my screen, and it's really just a recommendation for me to sort of proceed to the next step in the project request process. And so that's just telling me, okay, so total project costs not fully allocated on the cash flow tab. So just telling me that I need to allocate this $5 million and change, over the life cycle of what would be a supported project. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to the cash flow tab. And I can see here, the total project cost, so that exact same amount that I just generated with the preliminary budget. Total allocated, so the total amount of this 5.4 million that I've allocated here throughout the project's life cycle, so those years that it will take to complete. And then the variance, so the difference between that total project cost and the amount that I've allocated. So again, to allocate my cash flow, I need to allocate that total amount. So in order to submit this project request, I would need the total variance to be 0. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm just going to start submitting it again. To be accepted, it needs to have that sort of project cash flow, some cash flow attributed in those first 3 years to be, submitted to CMB for analysis. So I'm just going to start here. So you can see once I've entered in a value here, the system will start to recognize that allocation. You can see my total allocation has changed, as well as the variance has now gone down. So the expectation here is that I fully allocate that total project cost throughout the years here. Once I've fully allocated that cash flow, you can see here my total variance is now 0. And again, that warning has now disappeared as I've fully allocated this project request. And so once I've fully allocated my cash flow, I'm now ready to move on to the next step of the project request process, and that's completing my project request fact sheet, or my PRFS. So what I'm going to do to complete that is I'm going to click on the PRFS tab here in the top tabs. And there I see a series of fields. So it's key to note that in order to complete your PRFS, you do need to fill in all of these fields. So when the system does validate your project request upon submission, it will look for these items to be complete. So we will need to put something in to all of these text fields here. So project rationale. This is really somewhere we're just trying to explain the need behind our project request. So the scope of work, so what's going to be covered by the work, any temporary accommodation or busing plan, and any municipal requirements that might be pertinent. Um, and then what we're moving to is the procurement analysis. So that'll need to be completed for most major projects. And so I just want to take some time to explain exactly how this works, because its UI is a bit unique. So you can see here procurement analysis. It's in a subgrid. So this is sort of, again, a sort of glimpse into the procurement analysis objectives. Next, we have the sort of procurement analysis section, which is, it has a bit of a unique UI in that it's an editable subgrid. So while I'm down here in my procurement analysis, I can see my various procurement analysis objectives, and I need to attribute some points to the various different procurement methods. So my construction management or my design build or design bid build here. So I need to just allocate points to them. And the way that I do that is I simply click on under the points in the points field next to the objective I want here, and it allows me to just select a drop down here, and it allows me to allocate those 0 to 3 points. And keep in mind, for any given objective, you can set the same amount of points if appropriate. And then once I've sort of allocated points there, if everything else is correct with the description and so on, I then would just flip this objective to complete. And do note that every single one of these procurement analysis objectives need to be marked complete before you submit this project request as part of a capital plan. The system won't let you submit your capital plan if indeed your project requests do have outstanding procurement analysis objectives. So just keep that in mind. Now, there may also be a scenario where you think, okay, well, this description that's, next to construction management for competition is maximized is not quite, what I was hoping to have there. You're also able to change that. Now, if you click in here, you could obviously change it here, but you can see it's a bit of a struggle to make those changes. So if you want to make the change to description, I would recommend that you actually access this individual objective record, and you do that by simply clicking here. And that will take me to a bigger screen here where I see more that same information about the objective, just in its own little form organization here. So again, I can see the various procurement methods and the description. So if I want to make a change here, I can just make the change here. I can allocate the points that I want, so I could just say, this is also going to be a 2 and these are going to be zeros. Once I save that, I can then go back to my project request, back to my PRFS tab, down to the procurement area, where you can see my points are saved there, and my description has been changed to reflect, it now reflects the changes that I made to it. So again, I need to complete all of these before submitting this project request, but I'm just going to move down here to my long-range facility plan. So this again asks me to select my current long-range facility plan. So to do that, I would simply go here, and then I would choose my long-range facility plan that would be appropriate. So again, if I don't have one there, I can simply create or I can update or create that most current long-range facility plan by going over here to long-range facility plan, and then going through that creation process, selecting the date produced. Once I save this record, it will then allow me to upload that LRFP. And then if I return back to my my project, I can then see, if I go back to my LRFP section, you can see here my selection is saved here. So that's the one that I just created. So if you don't have it already created, that's how you would go about creating a new long-range facility plan and uploading it. If it's already created, obviously you can select that from the drop down. Then you're just going to identify whether this project is included in the LRFP, and then how the LRFP supports this project need. Then I then scroll down to my surrounding schools section. So The surrounding school section has a big impact on what type of PRFS you yourselves would run to get that accurate picture of this project request, but also will be the sort of definer on what the defining factor on what PRFS report the CMB branch will also run, and what information will be pre-populated in the PRFSs that they run as well during their analysis. So again, if you include a surrounding schools here, the way that you would do that is you would be from within this subgrid, you would select add existing facilities. So again, we're looking at facilities where it makes sense to compare, in addition to this this facility, it makes sense to sort of compare those facilities. So I'm just going to select Hamilton Elementary here. And you can see Hamilton Elementary is now populated in surrounding schools. And so it's clear to note that you don't have to have a surrounding schools as a part of your PRFS. Sometimes the inclusion of a surrounding schools isn't necessary or appropriate. For example, some of the rural communities, there might not be a school where it really makes sense to compare, their utilizations and their capacities. It just doesn't make sense. And so in that respects, it's not mandatory that you create a surrounding schools. It just means that the PRFS that you run will be slightly different. I'll explain that in just a second when I run the PRFS report. So I've included in Hamilton Elementary. I'm then asked to include the justification. So just being able to communicate to my colleagues and to CMB, to my planning officers, why did I include Hamilton Elementary in the surrounding schools analysis? The next section then is the PRFS alternative option. So obviously this project request is our primary option. That is the, sort of the way, the idea that we have for meeting one of our district needs. But as part of the PRFS project, we need to provide some alternative options, in the event that this addition isn't accepted. Are there some other ways that we can meet the need? And so again, I'm in the PRFS alternative options subgrid, and I'm just going to tell it to create a new PRFS alternative option. So I would click this plus button here. And so it's important to note that, having a surrounding schools facility here is not mandatory to run a PRFS. It just determines which PRFS you're going to run, the full or light version. So again, if you have a surrounding schools selection, you will run the PRFS full version. If you don't have a surrounding schools, you will run the PRFS light version. And I'll get into a little bit more depth there in just a second. So after I've selected a surrounding schools here, I'm then asked to provide the justification. So why did I select Hamilton Elementary as that surrounding schools that I want, CMB, my planning officers, to sort of use as comparison? So you're just asking that why question. Then what I'll do is I scroll down to the last section on this tab, and that's the PRFS alternative option. So again, the project request is our primary option, but in the event that this addition project request is not supported, or discussion needs to be had about some other options to meet your district need, that's why PRFS alternative options are really a part of this process, to provide that option. So the way that I create them is from within the PRFS alternative options subgrid here. I can see it says new PRFS alternative option. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to select new. Then what you can see here is a new form appears here, and there's several fields that I need to populate in order to save and complete this alternative option. I'll just discuss a few of those. So again, the name. So the name is a free text field. So we did that purposely so that if an alternative option really doesn't fit nicely in this sort of submission category and project type sort of categorization, say like a grade reconfig, we want you to be able to provide a little bit of detail on this alternative option in the name as well. For this scenario, I'm just going to put, an additional, another addition. Then I'm asked to select my submission category. Again, if this was, a grade reconfig, you would not need to, fill out these fields. They're not required. So the system is flexible enough to capture that sort of unique data. But for this one, obviously, it's an addition here. And once I select addition, I can then see the project type is now editable. It's no longer locked from me. So again, I'm just going to select addition. Then I'm asked to select the facility where this option would take place. So I'm just going to select a random one here. You can see the inclusion of proposed facility. So that's in place just in case, your alternative option was a new school, right? Well, that's not in your facility inventory. So you just provide some hypothetical new name for that facility. Then you're asked, similar to what you were doing with the project request, you're asked for, when would this start? When do we need funding? When would construction and that sort of process take place? So I'm just going to include it. Again, it's going to take a little bit longer for the occupancy on this particular project. And then I'm asked to, sort of provide my lens on things. So how much would this addition change to the calculated operating capacity? Again, just your sort of ballpark figures here. So I'm just going to put 15. And then, how would this change, again, the total operating capacity from your district numbers? Just, again, a guesstimate, not broken down by KES or anything, but just that total change here. So I would just put, in this case, it's going to change 20. I then can see that total option cost is not required at this juncture, but I'll make a note of that in just a second. So then I need to give it, again, the option rationale, the scope of work, so that same level of detail that I did where the project request for that primary option. So I'm just going to go ahead and select and just input some data here. Work. And then once I've saved, so are all those required in that sort of core information, I'm just going to save here in the bottom right-hand corner. You can see this alternative option now has that name that I put in. You can see now total option cost is required and is currently set to 0. And that's to give us some time to run the preliminary budget on this PRFS alternative option. So I would just click over here to the budget calculation tab, and you can see it's that same exact information that I was asked to input about my project request. So I'm just going to fill this out. And once I've filled it out here, I can again go to my command bar and calculate the budget, which again calculates successfully. I can see the budget is here, as well as the total space allocation for this particular option is here and calculated successfully. Then if I go back over to my general tab, I can see here that my total option cost has been copied over to this field as well. Now I can continue to make changes to this field and save them. The system will allow me to make iterative changes, but just do note that if you do make changes here and recalculate that budget, it will overwrite the value that is here in total option cost. So that's just to ensure that when you are done with this PRFS alternative option, that you do have the correct funding amount there. So once I've created my PRFS alternative option, it will then appear here on that original project request on the PRFS alternative options section. And again, I can create as many of these alternative options as I see fit. You do need to create one. The same thing with surrounding schools. You can add as many surrounding schools as you really feel is appropriate here. And so at this juncture, I've completed the procurement analysis section. I've completed the general section as well as surrounding schools and alternative option. And I just want to see the PRFS that's going to be then viewable by my planning officer. And indeed, if I just want to sort of assess this project request as I'm sort of making my way through this this process, I can then just go up to my run report, and there I'll see a few options. So I'll see PRFS demolition, which is again only going to be used in the context of a demolition project. You're only going to run that report if you're completing a demolition project. Then I have the PRFS full and PRFS light. And again, to reiterate, if I have a PRFS that has a surrounding school, I'm going to run the full version. If I have a PRFS that has no surrounding schools, the project request, it just doesn't make sense to compare it, I'm going to run that PRFS light. There's no difference other than the inclusion of a surrounding schools section. So then I click this PRFS full, and the PRFS report will begin to generate in another tab. but I do have some parameters that I need to fill out. So again, that sort of extra information that I'm giving the system to be able to produce the report to my liking. So the first one is select surrounding schools facilities. So you can see it's already pre-populated with a value of Hamilton Elementary, and that's because it's populating that parameter because you told it that Hamilton Elementary is a surrounding school. And so it's key to note that once you enter in a surrounding schools here, every time you run the PRFS, it will automatically populate your surrounding schools parameter here with that value that you inputted there. But again, yourselves and your planning officers, when they're running the PRFS, can add additional values here. So you can just simply select the down arrow, and you can see Hamilton's already selected. You can unselect it if you want to see like sort of a different version. You can select other schools to include in your PRFS. I would just make note that if you run this report with a few other surrounding schools selected, and you think, okay, yeah, that's the most accurate picture, what I would then go back is go back to your project request and add those additional surrounding schools, because again, that's the picture that you think is most appropriate, and that's the one that you really want to start off with the next time you, your colleagues, or your planning officers are running that PRFS alternative option report. So again, I'm just going to leave it with Hamilton here. Then I'm asked to select a capacity type, and I have those 3 capacity types. So again, design, calculated operating, district operating. So again, I can run this report, and then I want to see the operating, calculate operating. I can just simply come back up here to this capacity. I can change it, and I can run the report again. So again, this report is flexible. It will run. The system isn't going to save your selections. You can change them. You can produce multiple versions to sort of really analyze your project request process, but also the information that's being provided to CMB. So again, I'm just going to click Review Report. And you can see the PRFS that you probably are very familiar with from previous iterations of the project request fact sheet is now generated. You can see there's some baseline school information about Blundell Elementary, some baseline project information. Then you have information again that you put in on the PRFS tab. So that project rationale here. All that information is here. A summarization of your procurement analysis with all those points and those description changes here you can see is there. And then a summarization, a totaling of those procurement method point allocations. Then that extra information about your long range facility plan that you entered. Then there will be a section that breaks down all of your various PRFS alternative options. So it'll show you your various options, and so for each one you will see a breakdown like this. Then you're also, you can also see a surrounding schools analysis, which will include that core facility that your project request is against, and then any additional facilities that you selected here in the parameter. And it will break down sort of those enrollment and those capacity figures, including utilization and surpluses and shortfalls. Then you have the capital projects options, which is similar, but in this case essentially breaks down your capacities based on whether this project request or its alternative options are accepted. So what changes will this have to Blundell Elementary? And you can recall that we said that Blundell Elementary, if this project request was supported, would have an occupancy of 2024-2025. So this project would really take hold of that facility in 2024-2025 when that addition is complete and students return. You can see that we indicated that there was going to be that 100 child increase to design capacity. It's now reflected in 2024-2025, and therefore the design capacity and the remaining utilization and sort of surplus figures will also reflect that change. And that's the same here for, what if that additional alternative option was the way you go. So again, this just sort of gives you a very nice picture of all that information related to your project request with what you're used to with the project request fact sheet. If you want to add notes, or if you want to create tasks for yourself or your colleagues to follow up with, or if you just want to add a document to a project request, the way that you're going to do that is if you go to the Notes and Docs tab here, you just click the tab. you'll see that there's a timeline feature here. So to begin adding a note, what you're going to do is just again just click into that enter a note section. You can then give your note a title, and then a place where you can provide some extra information. So the body of this note. So if you wanted to then save this note, all you would need to do is click add note. But if you want to also add a document as part of this note, you would just simply click this attachment icon here, which then allows you to add any document that you want here. And then you would select add note. And you can see that note feature as well as the attachment is here now on the timeline for my colleagues, for my planning officer to see and access. So if I want to create a task, so something that sort of triggers me or another person to sort of follow up with something, what I can do is again in this timeline feature, click the plus icon here, and then I'm just going to select task. And then a quick create form will then appear. So I'm just going to indicate the type here, and then I'm just going to give it a subject. So follow up with PO. And then I'm just going to give a brief description here of what I would, what was this task meant to sort of remind me of? What am I supposed to do? It's already selected against my project request. So once I save and close here, it will again automatically appear here in my notes and docs timeline here. So at this juncture, I've completed the majority of my project request. And I want my planning officer to give me some feedback. Maybe I have some questions about this particular project request, or I just want my planning officer to review it, to sort of just give me some feedback about it, and maybe begin communication about any areas that may need to be changed. So to do that, what I need to do is I need to publish a project. So obviously you're creating project requests throughout the year. You could be creating project requests that you don't intend to submit for several years. So by default, CMB doesn't, sort of need to see all of those draft project requests, right? So only once you've published them are you really indicating that, okay, yeah, now it's appropriate for my planning officer to come in here, and by publishing your project, you're just making it easier for that planning officer to find your particular project request. So the way that you're going to do that is, again, from this main tab on all types of project requests, on your main tab, you're going to see a field called Publish Project. And all you're going to do here is just flip this to yes, and then save the record. And once that's saved, again, your planning officer should have no problem finding this project request. It's important to note that publishing a project request is essential to the capital plan submission process. So all your project requests submitted in a capital plan need to be published. So the expectation is that when you're ready to sort of submit your project request as part of a capital plan, or when you've got it to a state where you'd like to talk about it with your plan officer, that you publish your project. And then it will be valid according to the submission, at least on the sort of publishing flag. But at this juncture, I've published it. I've had some conversations with my planning officer. I'm now ready to add it to a submission. And so to add it to a major capital plan submission, there's a number of ways that I can do that. So the first way that I can do that is from within the project request. So if I've created a project request and I want to immediately add it to a major capital plan that's currently in my system, I would simply go up to my command bar and select Add to Submission. That will then produce a pop-up here, Add to Submission pop-up, where I would then click the drop down, and I would find the capital plan submission I want to add this project request to. So of course this is an addition project, so I want to add it to my major capital plan. So I'm just going to select major here and click Add. And you can see my project request now reflects that addition to that major capital plan submission. So another way of adding project requests to a capital plan submission would be by doing it in bulk. So adding more than one project request to a capital plan submission at one time. And the way that you would do that is you would navigate to your project request views.
So here I am at all. I'm going to switch to my all major view. I scroll down, I can find my project request here, Blundell Elementary Edition here, and I can select it as well as a number of other project requests. And simply go up to the command bar, select Add to Submission, find the submission that I want to add to, and click Add. You can then see if I return back to the view that showed my project, next to it under the submission column, there's now identifying that it is part of the major 2021-2022 capital plan. Now I want to just show you one thing about from this view, and that is attempting to add a project that is already a part of a capital plan. So if I try to add a project that already is part of a capital plan, the system is going to give me an error when I go to add it to a submission. You can see here it just warns me that this project has already been added to a submission. So in order to add this to another capital plan submission, I would need to first remove it from its existing connection and re-add it to the appropriate capital plan. Once I've added all my major project requests to a capital plan, I need to access that capital plan to set the priorities and to submit that to the CMB. In order to do that, I go onto my left-hand navigation menu and I select Submission. There I will see a view, in this case Capital Plans Draft. If you were to select the down arrow here, you can navigate to some other views, including the view of the expenditure plans when you're doing AFG. But this is the capital plan that I've been working with, so I'm just going to access it here. There I can see a list of all the project requests that I have added to this capital plan, organized by submission category here. So additions, there's the addition that I've been working with, as well as some other project requests that I've added. In the case that I don't need to submit any project requests in a certain capital plan cycle, I can select this I confirm I am submitting an empty plan, and I can change that to yes, and that will allow me to submit an empty capital plan and to communicate that effectively to CMB. Next, you will see a file field. As I'm submitting my capital plan, I may want to add my board resolution, so I would do that by simply selecting Choose File and selecting that board resolution. Now, you can submit a capital plan without including a board resolution, but as I'll show you in a minute, the system will warn you of the implications of that. Indeed, a board resolution is required, so a member of Capital Management Branch will be in touch about that, and you will eventually have to include that board resolution. But one thing that I mentioned is prioritizing or ranking the project requests in your capital plan. And the way you do that is by simply hovering over here under SD category rank. And I'm going to say, you know what, the addition that we just added was my school district's #1 addition priority. So all I'm going to do is click here, which allows me to then simply drag Blundell Elementary Edition all the way up, and you can see that the category rank now reflects that move. Now, if I determine that a few of these project requests are not, they're just not at the state that I need them to be, and I want to remove them from my capital plan, what I do is I just look over here, there's a column called Remove, and I simply select the Remove button next to the project I want to remove from this capital plan. The system will then ask me to confirm that I am removing this. Now, it's important to note you aren't deleting this project request. You're simply removing it from this capital plan, and it will still be found under your project request. So again, you're not deleting the project request. So I've got my capital plan arranged how I'd like it. The projects that I want to submit to CMB in this capital plan cycle are now arranged, and I'm ready to submit. Now keep in mind, not all users have permissions to submit, so that will be something to consider. But in this scenario, I am approved to submit capital plan, so I'm just going to go to the top of my command bar, and I'm going to select Submit. And at this juncture, the system is going to work behind the scenes to make sure that my project requests and my capital plan are in the right state to submit to the Capital Management Branch. And as I can see here, it indicates that the validation failed. Please see the validation results section to find out more. And so I can see here in my validations error, one of my project requests is not valid. So it tells me to look under validation status. And lo and behold, my demolition project here I can see is invalid. The one that we worked on, the addition project, is valid. It is ready to go. But I'm just going to access my demolition project to see, what was wrong with this project request. Why could I not submit it? So I'm going to just click here. I'm then going to go to the validation tab here. And I can see here it says the project request needs to be published in order to submit. I also need to allocate the total cost, and there is no estimated yearly expenditures in the first 5 years. So it's given me an idea of what I need to do to bring this project request to a valid state. So I can just simply go into my cash flow. I can allocate that properly. I can also, make sure that it has been published and sent to CMB for consideration. And in this scenario, I'm not going to go ahead and do that. I'm simply going to go to my submission and I'm going to remove it. And once I've got my project requests validated, I can simply come back to my command bar and select submit once again. As I was mentioning earlier, you can see the system is warning me that no board resolution has been attached, and that it is needed in order for the ministry to consider approving the projects that I've included. But it does allow me to click OK to go ahead and submit that. So I'm going to click OK. You can see now that my submission record is now read-only, so I'm unable to make changes to it, and I can see that the submission status is submitted.
And if I return back to the project request that we've been working with, you can see here that the project request status is now submitted, and this record is now read-only. So all of these previously editable fields are now read-only and locked. Now, if I notice in my capital plan submission that something is wrong, or the project request I failed to include some really important information, what I can do is contact my planning officer, and there is an ability for them to unsubmit your capital plan, allowing you to make some changes to that. So if that does occur, do reach out to your planning officers. So once our major capital plan has been submitted, we're going to wait for CMB to conduct their analysis and reach out and finally decide on those project requests that they're going to support for the upcoming fiscal year. And once they've completed that analysis, they're going to release the results to the wider school districts to indicate what projects have been supported, what have not been supported and are therefore back in your project requests, your draft project requests. But say you want to sort of it's been communicated that the results have been released, and you want to investigate that capital plan to see what has been supported, and indeed, just in case you need to follow up with any documentation, specifically the capital bylaw, and attaching that to the capital plan. The way that you'd be doing that is by going to your left-hand navigation. You would go down to submissions here. Then obviously I don't need the expenditure plans draft. I want to go down to my capital plans results released. From here, I would just find the specific capital plan that I was hoping to sort of investigate. So I found it here. And here, instead of the subgrid that I was seeing before, where I could drag and drop to prioritize my projects, I see a report here, so a submission summary. And so what this is showing me is a submission summary of at the state of results release. So what projects, what was the total sum of projects that I had asked for, what was the total project cost of those that the CMB did support, and then if I just scroll down, separated by submission category, are my project requests supported, not supported? Now, of course, I can print this document off. I can also save it in a number of different ways. I can also compare this information to what did my capital plan, my major capital plan submission look like when it was submitted. I can then select submitted, view report, and you can see a slightly different report without obviously the results of that CMB analysis included. Then there's another important section on my capital plan here, and that is this supporting documents area. So you can see here's the board resolution that I attached, and then here is the supporting documents. So if I access the supporting documents by just clicking in here, so once I access that record, I can see the capital plan supporting documents form has appeared, and this is where I will see that capital plan response letter from CMB. I can just click here and download it. I'm not able to upload it or remove it because that again is a CMB document. But here over here on the capital bylaw part, this is from my school district, so I can just select choose file and include any document there that I want. And then again, if I've made a mistake, I can just come in here and remove that. And again, the CMB, your planning officers, whoever will be able to come in and access that bylaw, should once it's uploaded. Thanks for watching. I hope you feel prepared to create your project requests, fill out the preliminary budget, cash flow allocation, and complete the PRFS, and submit that project request as part of a major capital plan.